You win a priority, but it's usually a touch. Okay, you only need one touch to win. And if you keep the thread up and push, and the clock runs out, just the 15 seconds into it, you go, and maybe you beat the Olympian. That could be one of the plans, and it's been my plan for myself on many occasions. But it doesn't mean you don't fence, and you fence hard. And if an opening comes up, you take it. But it does mean that you don't take risks beyond what is calculated and what is appropriate. And another thing is, once you dig yourself a hole, don't go rushing in after your opponent to try to dig yourself out, because it's ending up with your opponent giving you a shovel. Actually, you're bringing your own shovel, because you're digging a bigger hole. One touch is fine. As a goal, if you get seated 12th, one of your basic goals should be at every meet to better that seed. So if you're 12th, you've got to be 11th or better. Sometimes that's really hard, especially with the new NACs, with 280 men's FAS and 150 of them being A's. It's kind of tough. You could get way down here and make it really easy to improve your seed. Or it could be the other way around. And I'd like to say something, and I think this is really, really important. You do not get the opportunity to win a competition very often. Okay? As it gets harder, you need to get tougher. You make the final 8, you're not just happy to be here. It's not good enough. Why have you worked so hard? You're here to win. You don't get tense, you fence just like you've been fencing all day, and keep your focus. If you're physically fit, it's going to be a lot easier. Going back to the baseline, physically fit, it's going to be a lot easier for you to keep your focus. Focus is really important. You may have a coach there that's helping you and pushing you because you don't have your 5-hour energy drink. But at the end of the day, you still have to want it, you have to be in shape, and you have to be able to execute your tactics. Don't just be happy to be there. There's nothing more frustrating, I can tell you from personal experience, to be 8th when you could have been at least 3rd in a world championship. I know it's veterans, but still, it is what it is. Gold is gold, and that's what you're going for. It's a training discipline. So when your coach gives you your lesson, he's giving you a lesson on specific things. He's trying to put a game together for you. It's really important that those mechanical skills, perfect mechanical skills, become rote skills, not skills that you have to think about. If you want your skills to be something that you just rely on happening when you get to that middle distance, and you can't do that without practicing at the club. You just can't. And you can't get frustrated. Getting anything you like out of this, Tom? I give him a hard time. I have to finish going with him. Hey, yeah, I'm going to ask questions if I see. Hold on, please. So it's repetitive actions is how you get those rote skills. And there is a big, big trap here. These are subconscious. These are visceral. These come out of you, at the moment when you need them to do, and you go, "Wow, that was great." Those moments don't happen when you're thinking about, "Oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this." It just doesn't happen. It's boom! Wow, I got it. That's when you get excited, but you have to practice it. So it's really interesting about the way people learn. And I'm not going to use Pavlov. I'm going to use Skinner as my baseline in operant conditioning. If I want somebody to do something, and I ask them to do it, I give them a reward for doing it. That's cool. And then I ask them to do it again. They do it for me, and I don't give them a reward. And then I ask them to do it again, then I give them a reward. And then 2 times I ask them for something, and they do it both times, I don't give them a reward. And they're doing it because of the reward. They'll keep doing it. I don't have to reward them because their behavior's been modified. Think of the slot machines. There's people sitting there, put quarters and dimes and nickels and dollars into the slot machine, pulling that handle, and they get a payout every once in a while. And they feel good about the payout, but they've just lost 50 bucks. If you step back and take a look at it, is that anything to be excited about? Not really. So that's Dr. Skinner's basic hypothesis. Our resident PhD could talk more about it.
Is this what
So have you guys ever found that you had this Hail Mary move where something happens and this is what you do in that situation every single time? That's part of conditioning, operant conditioning. You're not in control because you've already programmed yourself. So let me tell you what happens in practice and what happens on the strip. You throw something out there and it works. All right, this works. I'm going to try this again. It doesn't work. Well, I'm going to try it again. It worked. I'm going to try it again. It didn't work. Okay, faster, harder. I'm going to try it again. It didn't work. So, as Gustavo likes to say, everything is possible in FA. It might have worked, it may work, it's possible it will work, but it will work consistently. And that's why you practice. So when you practice and you throw out these touches like that, you get positive reinforcement for those bad actions. And you continue on with them. And then when you get hit, you think, well, I must have done my bad action wrong. Well, it was always a bad action. It needed to be improved. So you've got to be very, very careful because the more you practice, the more opportunity you have to program yourself to do bad things. In a lot of cases, you're better off not practicing if you're not going to practice right because you're teaching yourself how to do the wrong things. So if you don't have the discipline during practice to work on the right things, and like I said, take those hits, but do it right so you get it built in. You are providing me, as your opponent, with an opportunity to hit you very consistently as I notice the pattern. And especially as a coach, to provide the appropriate cue for the appropriate response. And by the way, every one of you guys are kind of coaches when you're on the strip, because that's the whole idea. If you find that hole, that bad operant conditioning, and you can throw out that same cue that pulls that action every single time, you're going to beat it. And it's not going to be that hard. So, doing and being able to have good body awareness, knowing how your body's working, how position your hand, distance, everything else, and trying to correct that during the practice is really very, very relevant. If you are beating your opponent because you're faster than them, that only works locally. If you don't have the skills at a higher level, you're not going to go to a higher level. You're going to be a decent result type of fencer in a local venue. You're not going to be the top 32. You're not going to be the top 32 in the U.S. on a constant basis. You're going to be someone that gets random results. And that's not the point. You want consistent results. And FA is one of the hardest weapons to get consistent results on. Because there is luck involved. I don't care what anybody says. There is luck. But you take the luck and the lucky shot with a grain of salt, and even if you made a bad action, you try to correct that bad action, even if it worked for you. Really important thing, never abandon the basics. I mean, footwork is a basic. Basic blade work. You never abandon those things. As you train and get more and more complicated actions, more and more breadth of control, you still want to come back to the basics, because if you forget the basics, you're going to have gaps in your game. And again, I'll still say footwork, footwork, footwork. Now, one of the downsides of this discipline I'm talking about is when you fence your teammates all the time, your teammate figures out what you're doing. Your teammate eventually figures out how to stop it, or they stop you from getting it. And guess what? You try harder and harder to make adjustments to that teammate rather than doing your actions. Now you're establishing bad technique and bad habits again, because now you're trying to exaggerate things to pull more actions. Again, it doesn't matter if you get hit here, it matters whether you get hit in the competition. Okay. Practice perfect actions and strategies. Basically, everybody that I fence with, I get something out of. If I got a beginner, I work on my point control and my distance because it's so simple and I'm going slow and I can do things correctly. Don't hit them hard, don't brutalize them, don't use my speed, I use my skills. If I'm fencing somebody that is equivalent to me, I may still get beat up and lose touches. I don't have a problem with that. And what I like to do is I like to fence for maybe 15 minutes on the strip, and then when I start losing my mental acuity, I say, let's go 5 touches. And that brings my mental acuity back up. I focus on 5 touches, and 5 touches is to win. And that's, again, the difference. So 15 minutes of real practice and responding, and then that 5-touch bout allows me to work on the 10% that I'm going to use for competitive purposes. And it's reasonable and appropriate to tell your opponent that that's what you're doing. I didn't tell Xavier today, but sometimes I need the edge. So don't keep score until that 5 touches and take a break. Make sure you get plenty of water. Okay, now we finally get the tactics and strategy. I've got all 5 minutes for the action. I'm going to talk a little longer than 5 minutes. But the last 45 minutes from 3:15 to 4 o'clock, we're going to get up and do an exercise. And I'll talk about that later. Okay. Again, I talked about earlier, you got the mind, you've got emotion, and you got physical fitness. Those things all have to come together. The mind really has to control everything. And again, you got to keep it simple. So when you before you get up on the strip, you should have a basic strategy. And the basic strategy at the beginning might be, I just need to dance with this guy, find out his distance, his strengths, his weaknesses, and I don't have to go out, period. Maybe I get him bored and he comes after me, and then that's how he makes a mistake. But you'll never know that if you just go after him. When you're down, you don't dig yourself into a bigger hole. And it's all about one touch at a time. Make sure your emotions are positive and your emotions are focused, and use them to increase your energy and your focus, not to defocus you. When you get frustrated with yourself, that's a bad thing. And it has no value being frustrated. A little bit of anger is not bad. A lot of times, as long as it's in control. Read his article. It's really key that you're in a balanced mental state, and you should read your article too.
Where's the article?
It's in American Fencing. It's like the last page. Last page.
Okay, he says he read it.
But did you get it? Do you have any questions? I mean, we got the author right here. There's a fuel. If you're thinking about a locomotive, that's the coal you're feeding into the furnace. That's what the emotions are. The train is on the track, and that's where your head feeds you. And by the way, if you get emotionally distraught, I love that. I'll tear you down a little bit more. Mark's laughing. I mean, it's like, it's one of the best things. One of my students came to me and she said, you know, I keep on beating all the guys and they dismiss me, you know. And I'm as good as they are. In fact, I'm beating them. And I go, cool. But they're not giving me respect. You're manipulating them. They don't even know it. It's a perfect con. What's the problem? There is no problem. My opponent gets really mad.
Can you get through it?
Maybe I fuel the fire, you know. I can fuel the fire. Top level athletes don't have this happen to them, well, except for tennis players. Not in fencing. We don't see that, because if they do that, it's random if they blow up. They're still people, they still blow up, but they don't do it very often, and it's totally under control, and they take that. And it's a job to the European athletes anyway, the fencers. But you can't let that get to you, because that is a sign of someone that's a local fencer. It's not someone that's a national level. Good qualities, strong self-confidence, strong self-esteem. A little bit of anger is not bad either. Throw that in and mix it up, but it can't be the controlling factor. You need to be in control. Thank you. Let me talk about 5-touch bouts versus 15-touch bouts. So we have multiple goals in a 5-touch bout. Number one goal, always at the highest priority, win the bout. Seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? Number 2, win each bout by as large a margin as possible. Okay? So if you can win that bout 5-0, and I'm saying if you can, and win the bout, I mean, again, that's the key. Win the bout with the highest margin possible. That's really important, because earlier I told you about if you ended up first seed out of the pools, you go out in round 32, you're 17th, and that gives you a hell of a lot more points at the national level than a 32nd finish. More importantly, your next DE is going to be with a weaker fencer, which is going to empower you a little bit more. So if there's 32 fencers in the meet, let's say it's a local meet, you come up first seed, you get to fence against number 32, which is the weakest person in the meet. And then you get the next weakest person at the next tier, etc., etc. That's why it's important to be the best seed you can be coming out of the pools. But again, you can't dwell on that. The first priority is to win the bout. If there's any question in your mind that going after that margin is going to lose you the bout, that's a bad play. You have to win the bout. But if you can win it with a margin, you do it. So if you're facing somebody that you know is lower than you, that you can kick their butt, and there's no question asked, you go do it. You do 5-0. If you're not so sure about that, you're not self-confident, you need to go for the win first. Always the win first. Now, direct elimination. Black and white. Win or lose, you're done. Right? There's a lot more options with tactics and strategy over a 15-touch bout when it's black and white. It's no longer a matter of, I got plus 14 because I beat him 15-1. Probably not going to happen. But you can do other things. You've got 9 minutes. You've got, patience is a better factor to fencing. It doesn't matter who it is. If you're fencing Seth Kelsey or Cody, if you don't have the patience to stay there and stay at the right distance, if you fall asleep, you're going to be in a much worse position. Okay? All right. So, we'll talk about some of the options there. So, we talked about a little bit earlier, you need to keep it simple. If you try to do something that's too complex in a bout, and too complex is anything that it forces you to think during the action to any significant level. It's like, oh, okay, I gotta keep my distance. That's good. This is simple. Oh, I gotta go parry 4, counter 6, repost with a lunge. Probably a little bit too much. Because while you're thinking about that, your opponent has creeped up on you and hit you. If you have to think about the action, it's a much slower action than if you don't have to think about it. So, there are things that you know that you can control and change during a bout without thinking too much about it. Those are the things you want. What you want to do in the club is practice changing those things and maybe on a greater level to get better skills in terms of changing. So at the point where you go to the meet, your level of keeping it simple is way above the other guys keeping it simple. Does that make sense? Now, all you're doing is getting on the strip during practice and just battling it out and not using your head. You're missing an opportunity to exercise your thinking processes when you're on the strip. Guys at international level don't even think about it. It just happens. There's, for them, it's still simple for them to make these changes in terms of in their head. Like sometimes the opponent doesn't let them make the changes that they want, but nevertheless is, you know, a lot of things are internalized and they don't even think because it's all automated in a good way. But again, if you practice, you know, a bad practice is going to get bad results. So over and over again, you know, what you do in practice is what you're going to get at the competition. And if you get lucky to win here, who cares? If you're skillful on a action, that's really important. I'll tell you why. If you got an action you know is going to land, all you have to figure out is how you get in position to land that action. Because you know it's going to land. Rather than this might work or this might work. Well, it kind of worked in the club. I'm going to try this. If you know a beat flash is going to work every time, then what you have to do is figure out what you need to do to get a position to do a successful beat flash. And that's distance again. So, you know, you setting up, boom, right?
It's timing too. Timing.
Well, timing is everything. So, yes, thinking too much will definitely get you hit. And by the way, I told you I'm a real good a reader of body language. If I see somebody, you know, I can they start thinking about something, you can see it in their body language. You go, you know, you see the shoulders shrug. You see their body language is very, very evident when I'm fencing. And part of my skills in doing strip coaching is being able to read the other guy. There's a psychology as well that if you got the other guy down and he's really feeling bad about himself, you don't let down, you finish him. He's more dangerous if you let down. Because what's happening is put him in a hole and you keep him in the hole and you don't let him up. So you keep on kicking him while he's down. Because as soon as you get relaxed and you don't take it seriously anymore, you go, I'm way up, I don't have anything to worry about, I got this one, and they get a touch. Okay, no problem, they get another touch. Well, now you've just encouraged them to actually get out of their hole and start fencing. Again, at the top levels, this doesn't happen because they're never thinking like that. They're always just fencing. But just fencing incorporates everything I just talked about.
So you're saying steering out a vertical rack is not realistic? You can't recite poetry while you're thrusting home?
No, people can juggle.
They just can't chew gum.
And if you're that much better, but think about this. I'm reciting poetry, but my body already knows what it needs to do. If you practice it. If I did body
Not
yourself,
allowed in the fencing room.
right?
Old-fashioned.
So I think it would work.
Okay.
I'm not going to try.
There's the highest level of sport is fencing.
And here's a situation too. You know, you decide on a tactic that you want to use, or you're fencing an opponent and you don't know what to do with that opponent. Do you make it more complex or you make it simpler? What's easier to control, simple or complex?
Simple.
So rather than going, I'm going to do ba 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 ba, I go, okay, I'm going to step back and do this. That you can execute. Don't give yourself something you can't execute. Simplify it to the point where you're back in control. Okay? Don't go crazy about thinking yourself out of the box because you can't think yourself out of the box. You have to fence yourself out of the box. And keeping it simple is better. You know, you got these fencers out there that are tremendously fast fencers. And they move like lightning. And they do all these actions. They look really cool. And you're still doing one action while they're doing the second one. Well, while they're doing the second action, you just do one action. But make it the right action. Okay, so basically, you know, simple things. You know, obviously you want to win the bout. That's always a good plan. Maybe you want to run the clock. Maybe it's a better fencer, but you know that you're just good enough. And this is the evaluation you have to go through. Maybe you're just good enough that, you know, they won't necessarily come in and hit you, but they won't. But if you engage them, they're going to hit you because they're a better fencer. Remember I said you got that one thing that works? Just keep them at bay, keep pressing them, stay out of the distance when they come at you, and then in the last 15 seconds of the third period, when it's 0-0, you take your shot. And then all you have to do is continue to fence. I didn't say hold them off. I said continue to fence for the last 15 seconds. Now that is a really risky strategy. I've used it before. It's worked and it hasn't worked. It's a calculated risk. But when I go up against somebody, I fenced Seth before and I fenced Cody before, you know, they don't know what I'm going to do next, but they usually get lazy. Even Olympians get lazy.